Hi folks, Steven here. So this is going to be another one of our discussions about the music of a Pokemon side game. Tonight we're going to be covering Pokemon Art Academy for the Nintendo 3DS.
Yes, we are.
Here with Anne from Pikapi Podcast like usual. Anne, any updates you want to give to the folks about your podcast there or anything else?
As always, Pikapi Podcast going through the Pokemon anime. We're finding lots of fun adventures with Maze Bulbasaur discovering humanity. So stay tuned for more delightful filler on that front. And delightful characters of the day. Let's see. Other than that, I don't think I have anything new going on with me besides the podcast. So
yeah.
happy Remembrance Day, everybody, and happy Miku Expo on the complete opposite of that spectrum.
Yeah, so I guess I should mention the guy who runs our tournaments, who's basically taken over a lot of the league leader stuff. I just wanted to send him some information. Is a veteran, I believe, of Afghanistan, and so very much appreciate his service as well. So good mentioning that. Okay, well, in this particular case, we do actually have something interesting to go over. Well, I'll be honest, I have not been following the latest releases in the Hatsune Miku series there, Anne. Have you been?
Very much I have.
I figured.
This is my exact jam. For the listeners out there, I would definitely recommend the latest two installments, Michi M's and Pinocchio P's. I don't remember what Michi M's is called, but Pinocchio P's was Pokemon in My Heart. Both of those, I think, are very good, very sweet lyrics. Very much they understood the assignment about writing a Pokemon song. Michi M's especially is just like not a lyric was wasted. There are puns all over that thing.
Yeah, I'll see how curious how that might or might not translate there. I do think they have provided subtitles for a lot of this, which still a lot.
Surprisingly, like there are puns that work bilingually, which is amazing. There's a few if you don't know Japanese, or at least what some of the Japanese Pokemon names mean in English, like Miraidon and Koraidon and stuff like that. But like for the most part, like I was surprised that like that pun translates to a pun also in English. I was like, well done, everybody.
Yeah, I guess I'll have to check those out at some point. Let's see. As far as on my end, not too much going on. As far as episodes, I have in the last month or so gotten out 2 episodes. One is our Smash Brothers Brawl music discussion, as well as our Pokemon Rumble Blast discussion. I also tossed in our pre-discussion from our last one where I sort of quizzed you using disguised vocal clips from prior discussions to see if you could figure out who it was that said it and whatnot. So that was a kind of a fun little bonus I tacked on to the previous episode that came out a week or so ago. So do check all that stuff out. However, our actual subject tonight is we do want to record our discussion on the music of Pokemon Art Academy, a quote-unquote game. Not to disparage it too much. It is always interesting when we have covered a fair number of those over the course of our series here of things that are kind of a little questionable as whether they count as a game. And that doesn't mean they weren't worth covering or worth playing. And let's see here. I just want to make sure we get all our stuff. That looks good. But otherwise, let me see. Go ahead and start our recording here. And just let me know when you're ready, and we'll
I am
go.
absolutely ready.
Okay. Hi, folks. Steven here. I'm on the phone with Anne from Pikapi Podcast. And in our continuing series of Pokemon side game music discussions, well, this is another one of those that game might have to be in quotation marks, but this is Pokémon Art Academy for the Nintendo 3DS. So, yeah, a little bit of an outlier once again here. This came out, let's see, in 2014, regardless of what territory you were in. In Japan, it came out in June. In Europe and Australia, it came out in July. And then for some reason in North America, it came out all the way in October of that year. So this led to kind of an interesting dynamic on my part. Earlier in 2014, I took a trip to Japan, and during that, I was able to pick up a Japanese 3DS LL from the Pokemon Center. And since, everything was kind of region locked in that generation, and since I figured this was a good opportunity to, try this, I picked this game up in Japanese and played through not all of it, but a good chunk of it that way. Now, I guess, Anne, I was talking during our test stream with you, and it turns out you didn't really get a chance to pick this one up. I think there's a physical version out there, but I'm not sure how easy it is. Why don't you at least tell us what all you tried there?
Oh, I hope it's definitely out there on a cartridge, because it looks like something I'd like to look into. But yeah, no, I don't think I even heard of this game at all until we were, setting out to record this. So I have no experience at all with this game. But I'm very intrigued, and I was able to watch some demonstrations online of other people who have played this game and are playing this game. So I do have some thoughts that I'll be happy to share later when we have our game discussion.
Yeah, and I guess I should mention this is not the only Art Academy game. I think it started in the late portion of the DS era and went through the 3DS and Wii U. Haven't seen anything on the Switch. The Switch does have a capacitive touchscreen. It works obviously a bit differently, so it would probably have to be a handheld-only game if they did something here. But there are some other entries, some that are just general art. There's also a year or two after this came out, there was a Disney-based game that had very similar features and whatnot. So it is part of a larger chronology. And like other entries in that chronology, this was produced by Headstrong Games, which was a division of a larger Japanese company, but Headstrong itself was based in the UK. This is more or less most of what they worked on. I think there were a few other games sprinkled in there, but given that this was a UK developer, it may not surprise you, the name we found as the composer for this game is Richard Wilkinson. And this one was kind of interesting. He does have a website, at least we think it's the same person. This is another one of those cases. And I found some stuff on there. Unfortunately, have not heard anything back from his folks, which is too bad. But I did some looking. It looks like he's worked on some other games, like one's based on the TV shows Peaky Blinders and Doctor Who. So a little British science fiction in there. He has an original album called Music for Strangers, and apparently he's also done some music for theme park rides, at least one of them. And were you able to dig up anything on this individual?
No, I was nothing that you haven't said, at least. Just kind of the basic bio that you've just read.
Yeah, so still seems to be doing stuff. I'm obviously a little disappointed that we weren't able to get in touch, but who knows? Maybe at some point I'll have an opportunity in the future.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd be surprised and maybe a bit refreshed to have somebody ask him about Pokemon Art Academy instead of some of the other stuff they might have worked on.
Yeah, and just to be clear, it looks like the other Art Academy games were composed by other folks out there. So I think this is probably the only one he worked on, or one of the very few in this series. But he has done plenty of other stuff out there, so definitely take a look at that if you're interested. As far as the overall style for this game, I'd overall say it's pretty whimsical. Like, there's kind of a variety of instruments. There's a fair amount of, like, acoustic guitar, horns, some woodwind type stuff. We'll talk more as we go along here, but Anne, was that your general observation as well?
Whimsical is an interesting word. Like, folksy and homegrown is kind of a vibe I get, and we can talk about that a bit more as we get into the individual tracks, I think. But yeah, these are all good words to describe this vibe.
Yeah, so as usual, we've each picked out 3 tracks to talk about. Let's see, the ones I picked were Lesson Finished, Track 6, and Track 8. Now, unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be a really good official list, and I think a lot of the songs are fairly interchangeable and not associated with specific parts of the game. So again, this is sort of we don't really have official titles to work off of. And what were the tracks you picked?
I picked Title Screen, Track 3, and Track 15.
Yeah, so there isn't a super particular order, but I have sort of arranged these in a bit of a way there. But in any case, we may as well start off with one of Anne's pick. This is the title screen theme. Let me state that I used the wrong form of the word. Mm-hmm. But in any case, you may as well start with one of Anne's picks. This is the title screen theme. I do have a few notes, but obviously an important track, but what struck you about it musically?
I picked this because I felt it represents well, maybe not all, but a lot of the instruments and kind of the general vibe of the whole soundtrack. Because like it starts out with a couple instruments and it kind of grows, and I feel like I can identify every instrument, or at least most of them, that appear in the later tracks. So I feel like it's a good representation of what you're about to get with the rest of the soundtrack. Not that they're all amazingly diverse, but it feels like a good sampler in that sense. And it's a very soothing and very comforting track. It feels a little bit like small towny in a way.
Yeah, you definitely get a bit of an intimate feel with a lot of these, that you're in you're paying attention to your surroundings, perhaps. I don't know, maybe that's not the right word for it, but the other thing you sort of said about all the instruments in there, I think one common structural thing is that a lot of these tracks switch instruments within them a fair bit relatively quickly, and I think we'll have some things to say about that when we go to our overall evaluation later in the discussion. To be honest, though, I'm not sure I have a ton else that Anne didn't already say there. It is fairly varied. A lot of these are. Anything else you want to add on this one, Anne?
Yeah, unfortunately, we'll find with a lot of these tracks, it's kind of like once you give your initial impression, there's not a ton to dig into. But it's just, again, a very soothing track. It's easy listening, maybe. Like I could see this being somebody's background music for studying or drawing.
All right, well, in that case, let's go to my first pick. This is Lesson Finished. I know it's maybe a little odd that we are covering this before we get to any of the apparently quite a few drawing tracks, but I wanted to make sure we got to this one. So when you finish a drawing, you have this track play. It starts with, as you might expect, an announcement, fanfare type of deal, and then it sort of goes on to a piano, bass, strings. Like structurally, this kind of remind me in a lot of a results screen in a sports game where, like, after the event, it sort of lists out what happened and so on and so forth. I don't know, Anne, any of the things I stated there, were those things that caught your attention as well?
That's kind of an interesting idea of the sports thing. That didn't come to mind originally, but I kind of like that. I really liked the little arpeggios, little falling notes. And I also noticed on this track, like, many of them have percussion and drums, but this was one where I really noticed, oh, hey, that's a drum kit. So I kind of thought that was interesting. Like, they just kind of mixed the percussion a little higher on this one. Like I said, the word you used earlier, whimsical, to describe the whole soundtrack, I feel kind of applies a bit to this track, because it just kind of, again, with those little arpeggiated falling notes, just kind of added a little bit of playfulness or magic, or just something light.
Yeah, and I guess if I were comparing it to some other stuff, one reason I think I said sports games is that, in certain things, like I guess some of the Wii blank games, this seems like kind of music you would have after an event, or maybe in something not a super hardcore racing game, but maybe a Mario Kart, maybe also like a wave race on the results screen after a race, so you can see what happened there. Obviously starting with the fanfare of having completed the work, it just seems in that kind of vein. All right, well, Anne, like I said, unfortunately, the rest of these are just numbers. We got these off of a playlist, and so we don't have real strong ones. I think they're actually kind of interchangeable. Let me restate that. All right, well, the rest of the ones we have here, like they're all pretty much just tracks. They're all pretty much called just track X, 3, 6, 8, and 15. And I think that's because a lot of these are interchangeable. I don't know if it randomly selects ones when you start doing a drawing or a lesson or whatever, or if they have certain parameters. But in any case, one of Anne's is up first. This is track 3. So Anne, what did you put down for this one?
Yeah, so for track 3, guitar starts off as the featured instrument. And then it kind of adds in what sounds to be like a violin or some other stringed instrument, and then like a flute-like instrument. Overall, it has a very homey sort of feel. It also kind of feels a little bit like a singer-songwriter acoustic set, like at an open mic at a coffee shop kind of feel, or maybe like a log cabin sitting around playing your guitar or something. Like there's something very stripped down and intimate about it, even though it does start adding in other instruments beside guitar as the track goes on. But with the guitar being like at the forefront, it kind of just has a whole unplugged aspect to it that's very charming.
Yeah, I put down that there's a little bit of a hint, and I think it goes through a lot of this, and that's mostly because of the instruments used. A little bit reminiscent of Movie 5, which does have an artist in it. It'd be interesting to know what kind of material the composer, Richard, got when he worked on this, and, how much of that, sorry, what was I about to say? And, what kind of cues and, like, how far along was the game and so on and so forth. But like I said, a lot of this, like some other tracks, a little bit of a hint of Movie 5 is kind of what I wanted to put down there. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts on this one, Anne?
It might become more apparent in later tracks, but I having not played the whole game, I don't feel confident saying this, but given that it is an art academy, I sometimes wonder if the tracks are meant to have like a little bit of ties to different types of world instruments, because some of we'll talk a bit more with specific tracks, but yeah, like there is a little bit of evoking Movie 5. Some of the other tracks will kind of seem to have like an accordion, and it might feel a little bit like stereotypical classic Italian or French, and some will seem very American, and others jazzy. So it kind of wonders if it's kind of trying to convey different styles of art or different places where art, stereotypically fine art, comes from in the Western world. I don't know. But like there does seem to be a little bit of regionalism in some of these tracks, not enough to like confidently say, yes, that's what they were going for. But when you brought up Movie 5, I kind of thought, yeah, like that might be something they're trying to do, because again, that was a movie that had a very distinct feel to it musically.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you had sort of mentioned a little bit of American, and I guess that's a good spot to move on to one of my choices, track 6. So this is one of the, I believe, the drawing tracks that has a definite Western and frontier vibe. I mean, it's a little bit. I guess you could say honky tonk. It doesn't sound like there's going to be a big showdown or anything like that. It's certainly like it feels like it takes place in a town, but it doesn't seem. It seems like an ordinary day in a town. I guess is maybe a good way to put it there. I actually think it reminds me a little bit of some of the more Western oriented, as in Old West oriented Mario Party tracks out there. I think there's at least one or two boards in the Mario Party series that have that type of feel in there. I don't know, Anne, when you heard this one, what were your sort of observations?
Much the same as yours. It feels very home on the range kind of feel to it. But not necessarily the day the black hats are coming into town for high noon, or like we're going to the saloon for some cabaret. This is, yeah, just we're out in the West on the farm. But yeah, it very, you hear it and you know exactly what we're talking about. Like this is maybe one of the most specifically diverse tracks on the whole soundtrack. I think like it's the most distinct.
Yeah, it definitely stands out. And assuming this did in fact come from a British composer, since it was a Headstrong was in fact, I should point out that they were eventually folded back into their parent company, so they no longer really exist. Um, you know, it's not that Western movies aren't seen outside the U.S., but they are definitely more focused in the U.S. than some other productions out there. All right, well, then for a little bit of a pivot, just a little bit, let's go on to my third pick, which is track 8. So this one is, obviously not Old Western. In fact, it has a bit of a jazzy feel. As far as a point of comparison, it kind of reminds me of some of the jazzier tracks from, particularly the stadium games, but also some of the other side games. The fidelity on the 3DS is actually better than what the N64 could do. But that kind of gave me that type of feel there. Maybe a little bit of a showbiz feel, which I guess is not completely inappropriate for this game. And what were your kind of thoughts on this?
Yeah, it is quite jazzy and very brassy. Like there's a lot of brass instruments, and it kind of had a sound that reminded me of my in junior high and a little bit of senior high. I was in a jazz band, brass band with my trombone, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of that. But then there is also some other instruments, like something that sounds like it might be an electric piano or possibly or accordion or synth. I don't know. But like some other little instruments, and then all following like jazz rhythms and things. And it's just not as distinct as the last track we talked about, but it's as you say, a little pivot. It's just something a little bit different.
Yeah, I do kind of wonder how things were proportioned there and all that fun stuff. Would be interesting to know more about that. But in any case, Anne, I think we should probably move on to your third pick. This is track 15. In case folks are curious, it looks like there are about 17 or 18 of these drawing tracks out there. But Anne, you picked out number 15 here. I did notice some things about it, but I'll let you go ahead and introduce it yourself.
Yeah, so this is another one where the guitar is kind of like an acoustic guitar is heavily featured, but it also has like what sounds to be like a glockenspiel or some other like malleted instruments. But what I love about this track is I feel like I'm in an elementary school art class, and like specifically I'm imagining when I close my eyes like a Japanese elementary school montage. I close my eyes and I picture the opening to like a Ghibli animated style movie. There's something about this that just evokes like that elementary school environment that's often portrayed again in kind of a Japanese anime film. But it feels safe, it feels comforting, it feels like quiet and like I don't know, like mindful in a way, like we can really focus on the feeling of drawing and painting and doing art, and like there's a childishness about it. Like, it's just, for some reason, I found it extremely evocative of like a very specific image, which I was surprising.
Yeah, you mentioned glockenspiel. This is yet another track where the Winchester chimes show up. Very common clock theme, the D D. I can't know if I can quite do the pitches right, but you've definitely heard it. We've mentioned it before. It's shown up in XD Gale of Darkness for the GameCube. I think the Lily Cove City theme is also somewhat based around it. In this one, in Gale of Darkness, it has a bit more of a foreboding quality. This one is certainly much more friendly, but I definitely wanted to point that out. Is that what you were... Sorry, I assume you noticed that as well, Anne.
I didn't notice necessarily the ties to Lily Cove, but now that you bring it up, like that sounds extremely familiar, and like of a similar vibe.
Yeah, so I think Anne and I, to varying extents, tried to pick tracks in this soundtrack that stood out for one reason or another. And sort of to get to our overall impression, yes, I think there are definitely sound effects for, turning pages and so on, and also some of the brushes and pencils and whatnot. But sort of giving our overall evaluation of the music, one thing you may have noticed is that not a ton of this stuck in our minds super well. Like, it's not bad music, and you certainly wouldn't want it to be super dynamic to the point where it suddenly caught you off guard and you made a mistake drawing and so on and so forth. But I do feel like a lot of these songs here, like, I don't know if it's the number of them, being about 18 of them for the actual drawing activity or whatever, or what, but they don't seem to be terribly memorable. And that doesn't say they're bad. They definitely work. But I don't know, Anne, what were your kind of thoughts in that area?
Well, I'm reluctant to be too critical because A, I didn't play the game, but B, because I don't know what I would do differently. Because on the one hand, like, I think the biggest flaw, and I put quotes around that because, again, I don't know, like, the full context of this, like, the tracks are not very distinct from each other. Like, the tracks themselves, like, they are definitely background music. At the same time, this is a game where the music is just background music. So I'm not sure how to critique this, but it's definitely something I noticed. But I would like to say, like, I don't know that I dislike the soundtrack overall. Like, my criticism, like, I feel like I want it to be different, but I can't say what I want to be different other than maybe more distinct, maybe more diverse, which feels a little weird to say when I haven't played the game. But like, a lot of these tracks feel very comforting, feel very sweet, feel very enjoyable to listen to in the background. So I'm a little unsure of what I'm trying to say exactly, but it definitely is not like jumped forward being like, this is an amazing soundtrack. I love all these tracks for this and this and this reason. And that feels like it should be a flaw, but I don't know that it is because it feels like it fulfilled its function.
Yeah, definitely functional. I think one thing that may reduce the memorability, there's a lot of instrument shifting in these songs. I don't find it super distracting necessarily, but I think it maybe reduces like the distinctness of the various tracks since so many of the instruments are shared. Mm-hmm. And, I think one of the reasons I picked a couple of my tracks there is because they did stand out because they did have a more consistent instrumentation. I don't know, Anne, any response to those comments?
That might be part of it. Just, yeah. I don't know what I would do differently. But yes, there are there are very few tracks where you can point out like this is the trumpet track or something, because they'll all kind of switch instruments midway through and then again start to kind of copy each other's vibe a little bit.
It certainly differs from some of the area-based games like in the Poke Park and other places, even Mystery Dungeon, where each part of the game has a specific feel or environment, and the music kind of branches out from there. I did want to compare to some other, art-based games. There are plenty of them out there, although there are, at least for me, are a number of standouts that come in that... Sorry, 1 second. There are a number of standouts that come to mind rapidly. One of the first ones I remember, back on the Super Nintendo, was Mario Paint, which does have actually a little bit of a Pokemon connection. Hirokazu Tanaka worked on the music for that one along with Kazumi Totaka, and I think maybe one or two other people. Now, just to compare it to Art Academy, yes, Mario Paint is somewhat of a different structured game. It's not really there to teach you to draw. It's more of a free drawing and composition and other stuff thing there. But that one has, 3 or 4 main songs you can have during the main art mode. Actually, kind of interesting. We talked about, having a sudden change. The 4th soundtrack there is mostly silent, and then all of a sudden someone will sneeze in the middle of it. Obviously, Nintendo playing a bit of a joke, but there are 3 main melodies in that one. Do you think this one, this game, Art Academy, Pokemon Art Academy, would have benefited from maybe having a smaller number of drawing tracks, maybe 3 to 5 of them?
Possibly. Again, I haven't played the game, so I don't fully know the function of all of these tracks. But if they're just the tracks that play under your drawing, yeah, maybe they didn't need so many, and maybe that would have benefited to just have, 5 tracks and just focus in making them all different. It's possible.
Yeah, going back to Mario Paint there, of the 3 real songs that are in there, 2 of them I definitely remember pretty well. The third one I remember the intro of, and nothing else. I think that third one is supposed to be pretty ambient, and you get to choose there. I don't remember if this one has a feature that lets you do that. As far as other art games, I don't know that I might have played one of the other, because of how they released one of the other Art Academy games, at least in part, but I'm not sure, or a demo of it or something. But there's also stuff like WarioWare DIY, and even though it's not technically an art game, the Super Mario Maker games have a little bit of that Mario Paint DNA in there. And I think, I can't name too many songs out of either of those right off the top of my head. I think, like I said, those have gone in a little bit of a different style that might have been a little more memorable. I don't know. But I forget, Anne, have you played any other drawing games, and what kind of music? Any point of comparison you wanted to make there?
I don't think I can make a point of comparison, unfortunately. I've not played I've not played any of the Art Academy games. The only DS game I can remember that used the stylus specifically for drawing was a DS game called Drawn to Life, where you had to draw shapes and little pictures and stuff to progress the gameplay. But I honestly can't remember what the music was for that. I think I may have, like many games, turned the sound off and just put my own CDs on. So unfortunately, I can't compare to anything for this game.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing that some people do actually listen to music while they draw or do other artistic work. I know that I've talked to at least 1 or 2 people who you may remember. Some of the folks at home may remember. Some of the folks at home may remember that I used to run an online internet radio station, Pokemon Internet Radio Network. And I know some folks have told me that they did listen to that while drawing as well. So, you can always bring your own music. So But yeah, not bad. Certainly functional, certainly fine, and certainly honest effort did go into it. I am not disputing that. But maybe not the best of all the art, game music out there, perhaps. I don't know. All right, well, that's going to be most of our discussion of the music there. Don't forget to stick around till after the outro, where we'll do our usual game discussion. But as usual, I do have a little bit of feedback to go over. Remember, if you agree or disagree with this or any of our other discussions, or just want to tell us something, you can always give us a comment on one of these videos. Drop us an email, pokepress@gmail.com, or at Pokepress on, well, they're calling it X now. We'll see how long that might or might not stick. We'll see how that turns out. But I do have not so much some direct feedback, but a little discussion I wanted to share.
Booting up the screen. But yes, send in all your passionate defense of all the tracks on Pokemon Art Academy. This music needs a little love. I feel like we were all a little lukewarm today.
Yeah, not bad by any stretch of the imagination, not harmful, but I don't know that I used any of the music from this game on PI or N back in the day. However, on another front, well, if you're tired of hearing us talk about We're a Miracle, the first song in the end credits of Pokemon, the first movie, of course the Western release anyway, unfortunately, I have learned some more things about it that we're going to go over here. All right. So this is from, well, X or Twitter or whatever it's called by the time this gets out. So this is from a user called Wanda's Legal Advisor at MusicChild007. And this individual sent out I think they're still called tweets, maybe they're called a message now, I don't know, to David Zippel, who is one of the co-writers. Just to review, that song was written originally by David Zippel and Todd Chapman. We'll go more into the history of it as it comes up here. But this individual sent one out and kind of wondered, why isn't it on digital services, so on and so forth, and what was kind of behind it. So first off, I got to this one first and sort of explained, I'm not obviously aware of the contractual stuff, but we do know that if you try and Shazam We're a Miracle, or at least at one point if you tried to do that, it would actually bring up an entry for the unreleased 20th anniversary version of Christina's debut album that was supposed to be released in 2019 and got shelved. I think I've read because she just wasn't quite up to her standards and wasn't able to devote the resources to it that she wanted to. It's possible she thought, I can get right back to it, and then the pandemic hit, and it's like, well, there goes that. So maybe we'll see something next year for the 25th anniversary. But in any case, I did sort of fill some of that in there. And actually, Wanda got a little confused there, thinking I might have been David, but no. But David did actually reply to this. So, here is the deal. We've sort of wondered, we thought for a while that it wasn't rewritten for this first movie, but it turns out, yes, We're a Miracle was rewritten for Pokemon, the first movie. It existed before and then got rewritten. So, yeah, it was originally written, the original We're a Miracle version, which is more about two lovers, was written for Christina's debut album. I think it ended up being kind of a demo type deal. And then Christina's record company, which I think was RCA, maybe it still is, I forget exactly with all the consolidation where it stands now, decided it was too adult at the time. And I guess somehow the song must have found its way to somebody out there, because apparently David was asked to rewrite it for the movie, for the English version. And that's what he did. And he gave Christina high marks for the job she did, and I think a lot of us would definitely agree with that. One interesting thing is actually Christina herself on this version for the movie is also listed as writer, so I don't know if they needed to make some additional changes or if she added some finishing touches or what there. But yes, 100% confirmed. Song was rewritten for the movie, and I'm sorry. I guess I have to go back and correct some stuff and fix some episodes and some videos and stuff. So, but
Oh.
now part of the reason I didn't think it was rewritten for the movie is that it doesn't have like a Nintendo of America copyright. Back then, there was no U.S. branch of the Pokemon Company until about 2001, 2002. So as a result, anything that was like produced for the movie or rewritten, like even Don't Say You Love Me, which has like a one-line change, says Nintendo, copyright Nintendo of America. But I guess the ownership is a little more fuzzy than that, I guess. But in any case, I had done an email with Todd Chapman, and I guess maybe I misread it. He did confirm, like I said, this song predates the movie in its original form, but was, as we're saying now, was rewritten for it. So, bit of a hubbub there, and I hope you're not tired of talking about this song. But
Never.
Obviously, we did talk about a lot for the Mewtwo Strikes Back Evolution as well, even though it's not in there. But it made a great comparison point to the songs that were. But, oops, not quite ready for that next slide yet. In any case, Anne, what are your kind of thoughts on all of this?
Well, it just kind of reminds me that the music industry is very much like Hollywood, the movie industry, and the script writing industry, and the movie making industry, and that like it's very complicated sometimes, crediting people and copyrights and ownership, and also not everybody gets to know everything. Todd Chapman, one of the writers, may have worked on this song extensively, but even then, it doesn't necessarily mean he's got all the answers. Same with David Zippel. He's like, this is what I know. I don't necessarily have the full picture. Like, this is just what I got. And like, sometimes we're left 20 years later trying to piece together the full picture. So that's interesting to me. We were always surprised, you and me, that like it fit the movie so well, despite not being made for the movie. Now we know it was tweaked a little bit. It's still an amazing song. It still works so well for the movie it's in. So like in that case, nothing has changed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I complimented David on his rewrite, and I guess by extension, Christina, since she apparently did some stuff there as well. I would be kind of curious, like someone must have found this either from, Atlantic Records or from 4Kids or Nintendo or Warner Bros. Or someone found this and recognized it as a diamond in the rough that could be reshaped and polished into something that would work extraordinarily well. And that's effectively what we got out. So, it might be a little more amazing if it hadn't been rewritten, if the rewrite was just something that maybe they decided to do, to sort of rework it. Going back to the 2 adult thing, it is a bit ironic that it ended up being rewritten for a children's movie.
Right. Not a ton of changes. So it's like, what part of this was too adult? Do you remember how old she would have been back then? Because I don't.
I mean, she's a couple years older than me. I think she was born in 80 or 81.
Okay, so she would have been a teenager at least.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think it may have been too adult for, not to be disparaging to folks who were young kids in the late 90s, early 2000s. It may have been too adult for the target audience.
Yes, not necessarily her.
Yeah.
Well, I hope her and her team. I hope her and her team know that it's got a lot of love for this song, because she's definitely adult now to sing whatever she wants.
But yeah, well, from what I've heard one isolated report that there is apparently like a live version. It's never been like recorded or put on an album or anything like that. But apparently there is a live treatment that she does, and let's not forget Christina's daughter. She has 2 kids. She has a son and a daughter. The daughter is younger. From what I know, she is actually a pretty big Pokemon fan, and actually appeared in a promotion around the time Legends Arceus came out. She got to play that for a little bit so she could basically do an endorsement with her mom there for it. What I've heard Christina herself, like she spent like a year and a half or two in the 90s in Japan, doing some performance stuff there. I think she's acquired a Mario Kart arcade machine that's like in one of the rooms in her mansion or whatever like that. So she's a legit gamer. And speaking of some of her, her kid stuff, she still does that to this day. If I remember correctly, she has a song on the recently released Paw Patrol soundtrack from the movie that came out, I think, about a month and a half before we recorded this. So she's still keeping that aspect of her career going. So I get the feeling, I mean, one of the other facets of this entire song is that it ended up becoming, about a month after the movie release, it ended up becoming a B-side on the What a Girl Wants single. And as good as that What a Girl Wants song is very good, having this as a B-side on it, I'm sure pushed some extra copies of that CD. And that was one of her high, What a Girl Wants reached number one in extra sales of this single. So whoever, worked out that contract on her end for that, you did a good job too. So yeah, it's got a, like I said, still a very interesting story, even if it isn't quite what we expected there. Anything else you want to add, Anne?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay, so this may or may not be the last time. I did suggest to David that, in addition to complimenting him, maybe you and some of the other folks should talk to the Pokemon Company about doing some sort of like revenue split on like an official music/lyric video of some sort for this song, just to, get it out there. But I suspect at some point it will become available on digital services, but I don't know, can't tell you when the next opportunity will be. It might be next year for the 25th anniversary of her debut album, but we'll see. All right, well, that kind of does it for our feedback. Remember, pokepress@gmail.com, comment on one of these videos, or at Pokepress on X. But we'll be continuing through the Generation 6 side games, and the next one we have on there is Pokemon Shuffle. So this is, in a way, sort of the third Troze game. It has some definite similarities. It was done by the same people, Genius Sonority, same composers, Tsukasa Tawada, so on and so forth. It's also kind of interesting is it will effectively be the first mobile Pokemon game that we'll be covering, because although it launched first on the 3DS, it also exists on mobile. I think you might still be able to download it there, even though it's not really actively being updated, but I'm not sure about that one. But it also does have, very much so, have a soundtrack. And we'll definitely be talking about that. Definitely some good picks there I'm anticipating. Anne, did you get a chance to play this in some form, either on 3DS or mobile at some point?
I did play it on the mobile. It's been a hot minute. I definitely don't have that app installed, so I'll have to see if I can reinstall it still and refresh a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the 3DS eShop is technically, only available for like updates and stuff, but I do wonder, since this was a free-to-start game, if you could still get it on there, since it is technically a free download. But I'm not sure about that. That might be an option as well. Not sure.
By next time we meet.
But until then, thank you very much for being on, Anne.
Thank you.
This has been Stephen Reich. All right, folks, thanks.
Don't go away.
Yes, we do have our game discussion. We have some interesting things to talk about, even though I'm the only person out of the two of us. Oh, hey. Oh, this has got some spam stuff in here. Let me go ahead and, off of Twitch. Yada, yada, yada. Darn, I wish there was an actual comment there, but unfortunately, no. Yeah. So we're cross-broadcasting this between YouTube and Twitch.
Cool.
Through our service, StreamYard lets you do that fairly easily, which is very nice.
Well, hello, Twitch people. I didn't know you were there.
Yeah, so always definitely appreciate that. So, but yeah, we're going to do a quick game discussion. We have some notes on that. All right. Well, despite the fact that game is in quotes on this one, we are going to have our game discussion as usual. So, yeah, Anne did not have the opportunity to play this, although she has looked up some footage and reviews and whatnot. So
I have a peek.
she won't be completely blind in this one, but I guess I should probably start since I did have this in Japanese, and I still managed to navigate through it. This is a very visual game, and I guess wasn't too hard to figure out maybe, but I guess we should definitely start with the drawing experience on there, which I think worked pretty well. One thing I was kind of surprised, you are able to export these things to like your SD card. And it turns out they're actually much higher resolution than what's on the DS bottom touchscreen is like 320 by 240, which is very low resolution. The actual images you generate in this game are about 1024 by 768 or something on that order. So not massive, but not as tiny as you might have feared. And as such, you have various tools to do different layers, different colors. Most of the lessons have a preset array of colors there. You can also zoom in and zoom out to do a lot of fine detail in there. So from that perspective, I think it all worked fairly well. Anne, from the research you did, what did you think of what you saw there?
Well, first I thought it might actually be a very good tool for teaching someone how to draw, because one of the first little lessons involved looking at a Pokemon and seeing the basic shapes that make it up, which is how they teach you how to draw in the real world, especially when it comes to complicated things like a hand. They teach you to see it not as a full hand, but as a square and a rectangle and another little rectangle, and that breaks it down into something that becomes very easy to draw. So I kind of really appreciated drawing a Pikachu or a Froakie or whatever, that you see it like, oh, this is an oval, this is a circle, this is a circle. Whereas if we had tried to draw an outline of the whole Pokemon from the start, we would have gotten something very messy. So I found that really exciting, that it really was teaching you some basic art skills. And then my second thought was, in this day and age where I have, a tablet, and the technology for digital art has improved by leaps and bounds, it's not as useful or impressive. But if I had been able to play this game back when I first bought my DS or my 3DS, back when tablets like that had really good artistic capabilities, were outrageously expensive, and even then they weren't actually that great. This might have been a really good tool to be able to thumbnail little drawings to streamline the process for certain projects while I was sitting on the train or the subway or something. So it's I could see in my mind little ways where I could have used this not just for fun, but to practically get things done or to improve my art skills in a way that technology was not as widely available or even existing at the time. So I thought that was very cool.
Yeah, they legit guide you through a lot of the basics here and talk about perspective in some of the later lessons and so on and so forth. But yeah, breaking it down to shapes is a very basic thing into, squares and triangles, circles, trapezoids, whatever. But yeah, so one thing I did look at a history of the franchise and compared it to some other stuff. This one is a little more forgiving than some of the other ones. You get a level or two of undo when you work through this, maybe more, but so it's a little more forgiving. I mean, that's one of the other nice things about digital tools is
undo.
As any image or podcast or video editor will tell you, the blessing of multiple undo, as it's become more common, first started appearing, I think, sort of in the 90s, but nowadays most software has some sort of capability, whether it's word processing or image editing or video or audio editing. You have the ability to undo multiple changes, which is really helpful. And it really was not present in some of the earlier Art Academy. They made you, just draw over it yourself to fix something. But by the time they get to here, it's a little more forgiving. And being a Pokemon game, I will say they do have some interesting tie-ins there. Let's see. Like, for example, they'll bring in stuff from the Pokédex entries in a way similar to like the community days on Pokemon Go, where they mention a few things about that Pokemon species, which is good both for the fans and also for folks who maybe know a good chunk of the Pokemon, but not all of the ones that they're going to encounter there. I mean, a lot of the early lessons focus on the more popular ones and so on and so forth. But that was neat. Did you get to see that in any of the videos you watched where they briefly mentioned sort of some stuff from the Pokédex?
A little bit. And yeah, like, again, it's like we're all here for the Pokemon. So like I did like a little bit of that sprinkled in. One thing I really liked about the game was I guess she's not your rival so much as just your fellow classmate, but the computer character, Lily, who's she always has a terrible picture of the Pokemon. I really enjoyed some of her offerings.
Yeah, well, guess what I had in my notes? So whatever gender you pick for the game, the opposite one has a character who will show up there, Lily or Lee. And at the end of a lesson, they'll pull up their drawing, which is, unfinished and has some real problems usually. I don't know. Some people appreciate that. I've read some. I've read at least one review where someone did not appreciate that. Now, of course, I was playing this in Japanese, so I got used to it very quickly, and so on. But so that was an interesting facet. I think having a companion character maybe makes it feel more like a class, I guess, is probably one way to put it.
And well, I saw a comment in one of the videos that pointed out like having her drawing be just so objectively bad maybe makes you feel a little better if you are not like if your drawing is not as perfect as you want it to be, or like even if you have maybe a slight disability or you're just not able to make the stylist do what you want, having hers just be like did she even try level bad might like make you not feel quite so perfectionist about your own work is a thought.
Yeah, I suppose they could, if they wanted to be a little more advanced with it, they could have a couple of different variations and, I don't know, use artificial intelligence or whatever to judge your thing there and pick one that was just a notch or two below there from your companion if they wanted to make it a little more, whatever there. But maybe, I don't know. I can see that facet not being to some folks' liking.
Yeah. Now,
another interesting thing about this is one of the few games to sort of reference the TCG in any way. Like the game basically says that these things are going to go not on real Pokemon cards, but within the gallery they are framed that way. Which is an interesting way of looking at it. Now, potentially, I suppose that does limit the art styles somewhat. I mean, yes, they kind of use all sorts of different art styles in the TCG, and several somewhat different ones within this game itself. But that was kind of a nice thing to bring in. I don't know if, Anne, I think you have less experience with the TCG than I do, so not sure you
have less experience, but the thing I love about the TCG mostly is the art. Like that's usually what makes me decide to keep a Pokemon card or to buy one is what the art looks like. So in that sense, I really appreciated that.
Yeah. So however, I guess we sort of alluded to it earlier in the discussion. I guess technically they could have tied this into the anime if they really wanted to. There are probably at least two possible characters they could have brought in there. We had mentioned movie 5 earlier, Bianca, not to be confused with, black and white Bianca or whatever it is nowhere to be seen in this game, which, given that it was a singular movie, may not have been the best thing. But we don't have that. And we also don't have good old Tracy Sketchit, who you think would make some sort of appearance. I mean, they did bring Todd Snap into New Pokemon Snap briefly, which was kind of a nice thing. But here we have a guy who's, I don't think he's the exact same person who's in the other Art Academy games, but they like are friends and know each other and have similar designs.
It's like Samuel and Samson Oak.
Kind of like that. I don't know. I do wish Tracy had been in this in some capacity. I don't know if there would be any particular licensing issues since he is an anime original character, as is Bianca from Movie 5. But I think it would have been kind of neat to have, like, effectively like several of the major branches of the franchise all tied together in one game. I don't know. And was that a missed opportunity in your view, or?
I think it was, and you're probably right. It probably has to do with character licensing, unfortunately. But there also are a lot of gym leaders who are really super into art. But again, probably still licensing even then. One thing, if they ever want to reboot this game into the future or something, is tie it into Path to the Pokemon League rather than the anime, since that is technically more about the cards than the anime is in general. So it's like there are future tie-ins that they could possibly bring in if they wanted to. But yeah, I do feel like not tying it in was a missed opportunity. I mean, the game does stand on its own as well as anything, but
yeah, I do wonder, had this been a Gen 7 game instead of a Gen 6 game, I mean, I think in X and Y you have, I think that's where Valerie is from a bit, but then you have Mina in Sun and Moon, who I think they would have very much, had this been a Gen 7 game, they definitely would have brought her in if this had come out a few years later. That would have been a very good opportunity there. I think that would have had fewer issues and so on, but still, I'm a Tracy defender. I think he's better than what Brock became in the TV series, and then this would have been, I think, a good point to use him.
Tracy is delightful and deserves any tie-ins that we can give him.
Let's see. That covers... You got to the Lily Lee's drawing before then, so let me just see if I want to put...
Well, while you're looking, I want to say, like, it's really cool that you were able to kind of buy this game in Japanese and follow along. Like, that's something I do all the time in my language study with multiple languages. And I would really recommend it to anybody who's kind of learning a language to do that and supplement your language learning, because even if you don't fully understand, your unconscious learning is a really big skill with language, where it's like, I don't necessarily understand what this word means or this combination of letters or pictures or whatever, but I know that I associate this word or this kanji with this image or this action. And that can go a long way to facilitating your fluency, rather than just, memorizing this word means this and this grammar function means that. So, I applaud you, Stephen. That's not easy to do, to get through a game in a language you don't speak well, but it's really cool.
Yeah, I think I was just not interested in waiting that long. And I think this was before I had my English 3DS XL, and I think this was before I had my new Nintendo 3DS XL to work with. So this was the bigger of my 3DSs out there, so maybe that helped a little bit too. But I will also say, I didn't really finish this game. Granted, from a creation standpoint, there's a free draw mode. You can technically never finish this game. But I didn't finish all the lessons, is what I mean to say there. But I was, even though it was only a few weeks gap to that one, later in 2014, the Smash Brothers for 3DS came out, and that came out in Japan a few weeks before the English version. And I was probably a little more excited for that one than I was for this game. Like I said, not a bad game, and just like the music, not bad music either. But I'm not going to say this is my favorite, side game ever or stuff, but I do appreciate that it exists, and I think that's about where I stand on it. Anne is, obviously, hopefully, maybe someday you'll get a chance to give this one a try, but
yeah, I
assume you have a similar outlook on it, I guess.
Basically, I think it was probably a really great way for people learning to draw, for just having fun, I think I'd really enjoy it. So here's hoping I can find it.
All right, I think that's going to do it for our recording. Well, we thought it would be short, but it ended up being about...
Good hour.
Yeah. So yeah, not a bad game. If you're interested in it, I would strongly recommend seeing if you can find a used copy, since you can't buy it off the eShop anymore. So you're going to have to find one that has it installed or something like that. I wouldn't rule out them doing a new version of this at some point. Like technically, yes, they could do it on the Switch as a touch, as a portable only game. Which those are, like I said, there are some of those. Any sort of heavy touchscreen game is like that. Usually they end up being art games or music, rhythm games where you have to touch the screen and stuff like that. Are undocked only. So they could certainly do that. And people have found a way to do some interesting things, like there's one art program, I forget which one it was, figured out how to do pressure-sensitive stuff, which the screen isn't technically designed to do, but they figured out how to use it by having a stylus that plugs into the headphone port of the Switch and sends in data through the microphone thing that's on that for voice chat. And it basically tells the system that way how much.
People are so clever.
Yeah, not 100% sure that actually came out, but I know it was being proposed and whatnot there. But that was how they were going to get around the fact that it doesn't have full pressure sensitivity, even though it is a capacitive touchscreen. Mm-hmm. But we'll see. Well, there's always that rumor that supposedly, I guess they'll probably announce it sometime next year, the Switch 2 or whatever it's going to be called is supposedly, and I'm sure, although they will be very clear that this is a new system to avoid the Wii U problem. I think that they will probably closely follow in from their previous thing, but they'll probably also have some sort of new feature there. But like I said, I think at this point that's going to be, sometime in the spring next year they'll announce it, and probably have it come out next holiday season or something of that nature. There are some decently credible rumors about some of the hardware specs and stuff like that, but I'm guessing they'll have, much like HD Rumble and the detachable Joy-Cons on the original Switch, I'm guessing they'll have some sort of thing that, at least, we'll see how it works out, but they feel is interesting there. I guess I don't know how much I want to put this out there because I think it's a rumor, and we'll see if it happens. But one thing that would be really interesting, it's been a while. Well, there's only really two Pokemon pinballs. There's one for the Game Boy Color, there's one for the Game Boy Advance, and then there's one of those Pokemon Pocket or whatever it's called. Gosh, I have one of these and I can see what it looks like. Pokemon Mini pinball type games. But one interesting rumor, and like I said, this is just a rumor. I am not going to put too much stock into it until we find out more, is that Stern Pinball is apparently making an actual Pokemon pinball machine. Now, like I said, that is a flat-out rumor. But I would like to discuss it a little bit here while we have some time at the end of this stream. If, I would love to have another, electronic, virtual pinball game. And at some point, if there really is a Stern pinball, Stern does create digital versions of their pinball machines eventually for use on there. So that would probably come perhaps as a Switch or Switch 2 exclusive or whatever it ends up being. But it would be interesting to see what people would do for an actual Pokemon pinball, one that has to exist in real life, because there is so much stuff in those games that's complete fantasy stuff,
Right, yeah. But not, yeah. I'm just thinking of even the original Pokemon pinball and your Pokemon evolving and things like that. It's
Yeah, if it does get officially announced, I wouldn't be surprised to see it on Pokemon Day in February, That seems like a likely possibility, although it could be its own thing as well. Especially if the table, like I said, total rumor. like there seems to be a little buzz about that, but I'll believe it for reals when I see it. But it would be an interesting thing. I think the other nice thing about Stern is they're based in around Chicago, so I could potentially do an interview or something like that and head down for a day or two since they're relatively close. That's the other reason I would really like this. They're pretty much the last like physical pinball manufacturer out there.
Oh, really?
Because the number of tables released during a given year, actual physical tables, is quite relatively small given the physical pinball audience is not exactly huge. So there's not a ton of that. In part because arcades in America, I know they have one over at the mall near me. They actually it's a I don't know who exactly owns it, if it's a larger company or if it's a local business or something like that. But it's a legit arcade with a couple pinball machines and a bunch of arcade machines and some I think they have a claw machine or two, or the cut the rope type deals.
Mm-hmm.
I think they have some of those in the mall there. So they are still a thing in American malls. But that would be interesting. But like I said, I'm not putting a whole lot of salt in that just yet.
We'll see.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add while we're still running the stream, Ann?
I have not heard any Pokemon game rumors. So unfortunately, no.
There was like I said, there was that weird one that I guess maybe was supposed to happen. I mean, I haven't played the part 2 of Detective Pikachu, the game, yet. And maybe I'm not sure I totally have to, because it sounds like it ends pretty similarly to the way the movie does, which is kind of, I guess, kind of amusing. We should, because we go by North American release dates, it's going to be a while before we get to the first Detective Pikachu game. Because I think that was released well after it hit Japan. I think in Japan it might have been 2014 or 2015 when the first episode of that came out.
I can't remember.
In case folks are curious what's next up on our slate, it's Pokemon Shuffle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's one other thing in there. And then I forget, I'm trying to think how far it is till we get to Pokemon Go, which is going to be
yeah.
That's with everything they've done in there over the last 7 years or whatever. That's going to be an insane amount of content in terms of,
Yeah. Music, gameplay, everything. Cultural impact.
Yeah, so. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for us. But thank you for everyone who comes to these, or if you're watching these on afterwards. We always appreciate that. All right.
Thank you.